Welcome back live. Ladies and gentlemen, it's the Mythicist Milwaukee Show. I'm your host, Rob Moore, the Deacon of Doubt. Find me at Robin Arrow. Follow the show at Mythicist MKE and tweet us live as we keep the all-seeing eye of Horus on the secular movement. With me is the Imam of Incertitude, Brian Edward.
I am, thanks for the intro. I'm doing good. I'm excited to talk to Frank Zindler, mourning the Irish loss, but talking to Frank should make it even.
Yeah, excited am I as well. He is OG, I'm afraid. OG atheist when you say that. Frank, do you know what OG is?
Oh, when I what?
OG. Do you know what I mean when I say you're OG atheist?
No, I'm afraid not. I don't know what OG means.
Well, I'm going to read you original gangster. Your original gangster. You were there at the beginning. You might in fact be the first atheist in the country since the founding fathers. But I'm going to read an intro here.
The Dr. Dre of atheism.
Somebody else wrote an intro, and I was blown away when I read it. So here it is. One of the most effective, not to mention hilarious, speakers for atheism and secular humanism today is Frank Zindler, author, linguist, translator, Bible scholar, and scientist. Truly a Renaissance man. He is an advocate as well for the much despised but increasingly hard to ignore Christ myth hypothesis, which he has ably defended in his books, such as the Jesus the Jews Never Knew and articles like Where Jesus Never Walked. He was acting president of American Atheists in 2008, and he was there at the beginning with Madalyn Murray O'Hair, who I can testify personally was the Antichrist in my household growing up as a young Protestant lad in New England. My mother hated that person. And here he is to join us, Frank Zindler. Welcome to the show, Frank. How you doing?
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be able to do this again. I've been kind of out of action for about 8 years, and so it's just the last year now that I really started to get back into the swing of things. And I'm really honored to be among the few that you've selected to have on your show.
The honor is ours, my friend. Indeed. Please, you're a big name. When I started looking into you, I was absolutely stunned at the breadth of your experience, and you're a young and vital 75, and we're glad that you've chosen our forum here to make one of your debuts and back into the limelight here. Take us to the beginning, my friend. Tell us about American Atheists. I'm old enough to remember almost the beginning, but like I said, the early days. Madalyn Murray O'Hair was hated. I mean, she was hated in America, was she not? And how? Tell us about the beginning of that organization and some of your experiences there.
Well, she was named by Life magazine as the most hated woman in America. She started American Atheists in 1963. It didn't have that name. Her first corporation was in Maryland, and it was not allowed by Maryland law to have the word, well, not by law, but by practice in Maryland. No one was allowed to use the word atheist in the title of a corporation. But, of course, 63 was the year when she won the famous case that banned compulsory prayer and Bible reading in the public schools. And that, of course, triggered off an incredible wave of reaction. And, she was attacked by the police in her home in Maryland and injured and had to flee to Mexico. It was quite a horrible mess. But I came on the scene actually quite a bit later. I joined her in 1977. But very rapidly we became really, really close friends. And she and her son John, who became the president of American Atheists, and her granddaughter Robin, who was my daughter's age, who ultimately became the editor of American Atheist Press. In other words, my predecessor. I am presently the editor of American Atheist Press. Madalyn became a surrogate mother, both for me and my deceased wife, Anne. And they were in our house here in Columbus, Ohio, a number of times, and all the times when we would be in Texas, we would stop off and spend some time at Madalyn's home. As I say, she was very much like a mother, a surrogate mother to both my wife and me. I think she liked Anne a lot more than she liked me, but nevertheless, we were really very close. And the murder of Madalyn and her entire family was a shock that to this day I have not fully recovered from. murder is something, let alone torture and murder, is something you read about in the tabloids, and it never occurs to you that it can happen in your family. And this was as close to my family as I could imagine.
I'm stunned to be talking to somebody who went through it. I remember it. Like, if it wasn't for OJ, it would have been one of the top.
Yeah, well, I was on the board of directors of American Atheists at the time, and we had our own detective work that we were doing to try to figure out what had happened to them. You have to understand, it was 5 years after the murder before it was discovered that they had been murdered. There were vicious rumors that Madeline had escaped with the American Atheist Trust Fund, which was close to $1 million. We had worked for many, many years to get it up to that amount. The rumors were that they had escaped with that and they were living it up in New Zealand or South Africa. Or there was one minister a preacher who said that he had seen Madeline in a bar in Romania.
Wow.
Now, exactly what a preacher was doing
why
in a
was he
bar
there,
in
right?
Romania, I'd love to know, but nobody thought that odd, so they just thought, she's there in Romania. So it was really a terrible mess, and when I then started getting death threats about 3 months after they disappeared, anonymous on the phone, and they kept repeating daily. I became quite alarmed myself, and the FBI and the police were unable to trace the call. They put a trap on my phone line. In fact, one day, the caller called in, and it just happened that a police officer who was taking my further information was there when the phone rang, and he picked it up, and he said, "This is Officer so-and-so," and the guy is arguing with him, "No, you're not."
Oh, my.
And there was nothing we could ever do to find out who this person was or where he was calling. But this went on for about 2 months, almost a daily death threat.
Right. That seems very credible in light of what happened.
happened to you is what happened to Madeline, is what I was told.
Wow. And you eventually became interim president after Ellen Johnson's run. How did that come?
2008. It was only about 6 or 7 months, something like that.
How did that come to happen, and why didn't you stay on as a full-time president?
Well, to this day, I'm working full-time. I'm actually 76 years old now, and I'm still working full-time as a linguist and editor in processing biochemical information. So all the time that I was serving as president, as interim president, I always put that qualifier, I was working full-time in a job for pay. And there is simply no way that I could do full justice to all of the important things that need to be done in a national organization if I'm not giving it my 100% attention. So as quickly as we could, we got a new president.
Wow, how much are you working now? Are you still putting it for the proverbial 40-hour weeks?
Yes.
That's incredible. It hasn't slowed down at all, but I'm convinced that's probably, we'll talk about your YouTube series later, part of the secret of longevity.
How did you come to be the president? I'm sorry to push on this. I wouldn't be any kind of a journalist at all if I didn't know. Looking in the Wikipedia page.
I can't do everything, but I was on the board of directors, and we had some internal problems that were very, very important and very crucial. And so I guess that's basically all I can tell you about that.
Then I read or listened to one of your podcasts where you mentioned that the mythicist argument, the first time you heard it, was actually from Madalyn Murray O'Hair, and that you were shocked and embarrassed.
Yes.
Can you tell us about that?
Yes, absolutely. Madalyn was, most people don't know this, but she was really quite a scholar herself in a large number of areas. We think of her only as an atheist activist in the political sense, in the legal sense. but she was very scholarly, and she had read many of the but many of the 19th century books. These were largely secondary sources, it's true, but they were really very good scholarship, which had indicated that Jesus was a myth, probably a solar myth. And when some while before this, the musical Jesus Christ Superstar had come out, and Madeline announced at at one of our annual meetings that she was going to write a book called Jesus Christ Super Fraud.
Oh, wow.
And went on to expound her findings that Jesus never existed. Well, of course, I don't know how many, I had been an atheist for many years by that time, but I had also become a biblical scholar for a variety of reasons. And I was shocked. Yes, I was embarrassed. And I thought, oh my goodness, I've got to do something because she's going to embarrass the whole movement. And so after her speech and we could get together, I said, Madeline, this is quite shocking. What are your sources for this? And so she just, right then and there, she rattled off this, that, and the other source. So as soon as I got home to Columbus, I got all these books from the university library, and most of these are very difficult to get. They were out of print and so on. So I had to get them from the library until I could get my own copies or photocopy the library copies. And wow, by the time I got through, we're talking now about 2 months maybe, I was a mythicist. And I just was so astounded how somebody who thought he knew so much about the Bible as I thought I knew could actually have not had a clue.
Right. I think the quote that I remember you saying was, I was astounded by what I didn't find. And that's
yes,
the thing.
There you go. Yes, exactly. Yes. So, yeah, I thought, so of course, that was the other half. I read these books, and so immediately then I had to show that these books were wrong, right? I mean, to try to find evidence that they were wrong. Mm-hmm. And there was no evidence. And in my scholarly debate with Bart Ehrman, again and again, if you read the chapter in my Bart Ehrman book, Bart Ehrman and the Quest of the Historical Jesus of Nazareth, in which, by the way, Acharya S. has 2 chapters, I replay the 3 years worth of email correspondence. And again, I ask him, what actual evidence do you have? What positive evidence? Everything is inference from something else, but no actual evidence. And Bart Ehrman never seemed to understand that he too actually has no evidence to show that Jesus was historical. And so it was that type of evidence, though, that I came up missing. And yes, it was astounding.
What Madeline Murray O'Hare did for you, of course, Acharya S. did for all of us here in this room and a lot of other people across the world. And Brian alluded to it in the beginning. We lost her, of course, in recent days. Did you know DM, and what are your thoughts as we reflect on her work?
I'm ashamed to say that I never really knew her personally up until the last 6 months, maybe. When we were working together to include 2 chapters in my Bart book, of course, that was really my first contact ever with her. And I have, of course, all of her books and have dipped into them from time to time. And incidentally, Bart was really outrageous in his criticism of Dorothy. And I was delighted at how beautifully she was able to strike back and come up with pictorial evidence, which we published in the book, to lay his outrageous claims to rest. But I received a really beautiful letter from her about 2 weeks before she actually died. She had a day apparently of some resurgence of energy, and in the message she even said, I'm feeling better, that I can even sit up now to type this letter. And she was extremely flattering to me, and saying that I was the only one left who, like her, knew all of the old references from the 19th century, the German literature and French and Italian and Latin, and that she was counting on me to continue to carry the torch. I'm not sure that she ever knew exactly how old I am, but she was just amazingly sweet. As you know, of course, Dorothy, like Madeline. In fact, I see a lot of similarities in the two women. Dorothy could be an absolute poison, venom-spitting cobra when attacked, and especially when attacked unfairly. And to get such a sweet note from her at such an awful time means a lot to me.
Yeah, definitely. It sounds like a powerful email.
Well, she certainly did as much as anyone to popularize the mythicist position from my point of view. Tell us how mythicism fits into the larger secular movement from your point of view. Do you think it'll ever be in any of our lifetimes a mainstream viewpoint among biblical scholars?
Well, that's okay, among biblical scholars. It will become mainstream in the greater culture, I think, and I think certainly within your lifetimes. However, when we're talking about biblical scholars, we have a very strange kind of community, as you obviously realize, because most of them are in religious institutions, and they teach Bible, etc., in colleges and seminaries that are run by churches. There are very few, although the number is, I'm happy to say, increasing, who, like Bart Ehrman, are in completely secular organizations, as colleges and universities. But still, the preponderance of Bible scholars are in religiously controlled institutions. And so their bread and butter depends upon defending the historicity of Jesus of Nazareth. And so that is a serious problem, and I can't imagine how that could ever change. We have our dear friend Robert Price with 2 doctorates, who, you know, because he's an atheist and a mythicist, cannot teach anymore. He had been a teacher in several seminaries, but he cannot find a post, and so he is almost completely dependent upon the earnings from his writings. And I am, really, really happy to have been able to publish a number of his books. But American Atheist Press does not have really any advertising budget, and so we can't publicize the books and advertise the books as much as we would like. Which brings me to, of course, our most recent book by René Salm. It's his second book on Nazareth, and it's called Nazareth Gate, Quack Archaeology, Holy Hoaxes, and the Invented Town of Jesus. And this book is really a blockbuster because it absolutely nails to the wall the fact that the town of Nazareth did not exist at the time that Jesus and the Holy Family should have been living there. And of course, the logic is pretty easy. If there never was a land of Oz, there never was a Wizard of Oz. And if there never was a town of Nazareth, there never was a Jesus of Nazareth. So Jesus of Nazareth is perhaps the only God I can think of who can empirically be disproven. That is, if you exhaustively comb the sites that are claimed to be Nazareth and show that there is no trace of habitation there, that takes care of that. And it's an exhaustive proof of the negative.
Oh, so you're saying that Nazareth never existed at all, not just that it was already empty or hadn't been formed yet.
Nazareth existed during the Bronze Age and the Iron Age, and then it was abandoned, and it was not resettled until after the first Jewish revolt in 70 CE. And real remains don't really start showing up until the 2nd century CE. But there was no town there at all, and not that it was uninhabited. There was no town there at the turn of the era.
So in this book, does he look at existing so-called relics that were actually supposed to be from Nazareth and show that they were anachronistic or something?
Yeah, he did that in his first book. Incidentally, I myself, back in the early 80s, had come to the conclusion that Nazareth did not exist and at the turn of the era. And I had gone through all of the archaeological reports. They were mostly in Italian and German. And interestingly, Rene went to the very same reports. I mean, unlike me, though, he was absolutely exhaustive in the way he treated these sources. He cataloged absolutely every remains and cross-indexed them and showed that some had been counted twice or thrice and re-identified. But
and what are these? Are these bits of pottery?
Quite clearly that these reports were just bogus. And as I came to the conclusion that so-called biblical archaeology is a type of biblical apologetics. It's very much akin to creation science. It either misinterprets facts or just downright invents facts. And the reason this new book, Nazareth Gate, is so important, when I published Rene Salm's first book in 2008, called The Myth of Nazareth, he predicted in several articles in the American Atheist magazine, and at that time I was editor of the magazine also, he predicted that now that he had blown away all of the existing reports, he literally cataloged every artifact anyone had collected at the site of Nazareth, at the venerated sites, that anyone claimed was of the period at the turn of the era. I mean, there was no disputing the stuff from the Bronze Age or the Iron Age and late stuff. But the crucial period, he predicted that efforts would be made to, quote, find, unquote, evidence, in other words, coins and buildings. And sure enough, in rapid fire, there were reports of coins and so on. And now we have on the Christmas news just last week or 2 weeks ago, we have the house from the time of Jesus. And all of this is exposed in Nazareth Gate. And we had our own man on the ground in Israel showing how excavations were being changed and altered and so on. And most exciting, Rene proves, I think, quite conclusively that the famous Caesarea synagogue inscription, which is allegedly the first mention of Nazareth in an inscription, Rene shows that this was a forgery perpetrated by a notorious apologist named Jerry Vardaman. And Rene somehow got access to Vardaman. He's been dead for some years now, but somehow Rene got access to his field notes and ties us all in with Vardaman on the very day that the Nazareth fragment was discovered, Renee was hauled off by the police and
Wow.
and removed from the excavation team. And none of this had been known to me, of course, but Renee is an amazing man. He's a very good detective as well as archaeological critic and biblical scholar. And I hope you'll have him on your show sometime to really give you the lowdown on this.
I think we will. We're looking at it right now. It's www.nazarethmyth.info. You can go and check it out. It's The Myth of Nazareth. Nazareth Gate.
Yeah.
It's a sequel. It's his second book, The Myth of Nazareth, in 2008. And this the follow-up, Nazareth Gate. So go there, nazarethmyth.info, and check out Renee Salm. It sounds like good stuff. It fits right in with what we do here at the Mythicist Milwaukee show. And you also brought up the Bart Ehrman, debating Bart Ehrman's scholarship. Of course, you're aware we're hosting the long-awaited debate between Robert Price and Bart Ehrman in October.
Oh, I did not realize that you were the host for that.
Indeed, we are, and we're proud to bring that to Milwaukee and finally, learn the truth. I think it's going to decide the answer once and for all. After the debate, we'll publish the findings. Jesus does or does not exist.
Great.
Do you have any?
Well, I really appreciate that.
Do you have any prognostications or, where their strengths lie? Analyze this like we might the Super Bowl and pretend you're on ESPN? Or what you'd like to see?
Yeah, let me characterize. I've known both of them for about 30 years. I followed both of their careers. I'd been a member of SBL, the Society of Biblical Literature. That's the professional Bible scholars group. I think for at least 30 years, maybe a little bit more. And I can't remember when I first saw Bart Ehrman at those meetings giving papers, and I can't quite remember when I first met Bob, but I read Bob's earliest books and followed his career very astutely. But I predicted way back from the track that I saw their research taking that both of them would become atheists, and I predicted that both of them would become mythicists because their research was really trending in that direction. Of course, I was completely right with Price, but I was wrong on the second part with Ehrman. With Ehrman, I think that his education has been too narrow is the problem. He, of course, says that, I'm unqualified because I haven't got a degree in biblical studies. But I say that he's not fully qualified either because he doesn't have the wide range of education that I do. So we've got sort of a standoff there. But to compare him now with Price, Price has a very broad education. And Price has read an enormous range of scholarship that Ehrman doesn't even know exists. Ehrman is, in a sense, the quintessence of the joke about the PhD. He knows more and more about less and less.
Nice. Well, more zingers.
And so that is my critique. I mean, Ehrman is very, very good at what he does, and I admire him as a teacher. I've watched all of his great courses from the teaching company, and we've been personal friends all these years. I really can't really say much bad about him, except that, he really unfairly trashed me in his New York Times bestseller, Did Jesus Exist?, when he said, I just made up the information.
Oh, okay.
And, of course, that is what I present in my first full chapter in the book that Bob Price and I co-edited and co-authored along with several other mythicists, including Dorothy. I showed that he had asked for that information and I supplied it. And then in his book, he said, I just made it up. So that's my gripe, my only gripe against Bart. But he's a kind man. When my wife died, he expressed his condolence, and I felt they were very sincere. And so I'm still hopeful that that Bart may come around. But I feel that he is now financially committed to the historicity position, and that there's really no way he can get out of that entropy well.
Well, we'd love, you have till October to plan. We'd love to see you out here for the debate. Would that be something you'd be interested in attending?
Oh, I'd love to. Yes, yes.
Yeah, we'll make sure you get the information on that. You know,
yes,
plenty of time to
do.
plan. It's a much-awaited, huge event that's going to be here on October 19th, Sean?
Yes, that's right.
The 19th at Turner Hall, famous historic venue here in Wisconsin. So we're really looking forward to
what is that hall called?
Turner Hall, famous.
Oh, Turner Hall. Okay.
Yeah, famous concert venue. You mentioned the precession of equinoxes before we were on the air. Talk to us about
precession of the equinoxes.
Yeah. Talk to us about that. That's one of Acharya's main points, as told through Zeitgeist, that really got our fascination too, and personally, sparked my interest in it.
As many of our listeners may already know, around the turn of the era, the vernal equinox moved from the zodiacal sign, from the zodiacal constellation, I should say, Aries, into the constellation Pisces. And the view of many of the ancients, including Hipparchus earlier, was that it had to be a god who was tilting the axis, the axial pole of the Earth, in order to apparently move the equinox along the ecliptic. And if a god was involved, then it would be necessary to find out who that god was. There seems to have been a view that there were chronocrators, in other words, time lords, who reigned over each sign of the zodiac, each great year or each epoch or whatever. At the time of Augustus Caesar, the poet Virgil wrote an eclogue, his fourth eclogue, in which he talked about the birth of the miraculous child and the dawning of a new age. Well, we find new age over and over and over again in ancient literature, and of course we continue on to this day with talk about so-called new age religion. Well, what is the new age? It's a zodiacal age. It's a precessional age. At the turn of the era, it was the new age of Pisces that was dawning. Today, as we speak, it's the age of Aquarius that is dawning, to quote the song. We still have a little ways to go, but still we talk about the beginning of a new age. And again, you come back to find out that whenever they're talking about a new age, at least almost all the time, it is the new age of Pisces that is being talked about. And so this, I believe, triggered a tremendous amount of speculation in the ancient world, in the Mediterranean world, to work this all out. And I think a number of religions were spawned as a result of that. One of them was the emperor cult of Augustus Caesar, or Octavian. The Aeneid of Virgil, I think, is the first gospel. It tells the mythic story leading up to Augustus and puts him in the mythic framework. He's descended from Venus and so forth. And I think that the first gospel, maybe the verbal equivalent of the first gospel, was very much like the Aeneid. It was just that it was placing it in a Jewish setting rather than in a Roman setting. And so the precession is interesting for Pisces in particular, because as you know, on bumper stickers at least, and the things that they put on the backs of automobiles, the ichthys fish, and this of course is the famous acrostic in the Sibylline oracles. Incidentally, before there were Gospels, it appears that the Sibylline oracles were viewed as scripture just along with the Jewish scriptures. But the Jesus Christ, Son of God, Savior, was part of, I think that acrostic was written in response to the movement of the ecliptic into Pisces. And if you look at really the earliest identifiably Christian gravestones and inscriptions, they have not just one fish, but they have two fishes engraved upon them, and that makes it crystal clear that we're talking about the constellation of Pisces, which is two fishes. And the fishes are. I was going to say about the Sibylline oracles. In that double acrostic, it not only has the word in Greek spelling out ichthys, but there is an extra word. It ends in Jesus Christ, Son of God, Savior, stauros, or cross. And the word cross in Greek, stauros, did not originally mean a crisscross, such as we think of in the Roman cross. It was just a pole or a stake. And it appears that the cross referred to, or the stauros, the pole referred to in that Sibylline double acrostic, it's a double acrostic, by the way, the pole referred to, or the cross referred to, is the axial pole of the universe. And I think that in that Sibylline double acrostic, we are seeing the equation of Jesus as the mover of the of the axial pole of the universe, and causing the precession. So I just recently came across something else supporting that equivalent, but unfortunately I don't have my notes here right now. I can't remember what.
No, that's great stuff. I'm glad to hear somebody talk about the validity of those findings as presented in the movie, because it seemed to be glossed over, Brian.
I mean, they hit it, but they didn't necessarily have a ton of backup evidence. Like, for example, they'll mention, and these ages are about 2,000 years. I mean, is there evidence?
A little bit over, yeah.
Yeah, is there evidence that people were talking about a dawning of a new age when it went from Taurus to Aries, like, say, 2,000 years prior to that?
The discovery of that was by Hipparchus of Rhodes, and that was around 125 or so BCE. And apparently Hipparchus, but we're not sure, thought that the god who was responsible for that movement from Taurus into Aries was the equivalent of Perseus, and that the Persian god that was known was Mithra. And so at that point, the Mithraic religion began in the West. And so Mithras was the chronocrat for the age of Aries. And then, incidentally, if you've ever thought about it, the Mithraists had the Taurobolium, where they sacrificed a bull. And so that supposedly symbolized movement from Taurus into Aries. But the Christians celebrate the sacrifice of the lamb. In other words, the sacrifice of the Aries, or ram, or bull, or sheep, as things moved into Pisces. So, admittedly, a lot of, well, I guess all of this is circumstantial. But the question becomes somewhere, at some point, well, how much circumstantial evidence do you need before, you conclude that the argument is valid?
Right.
It
I think it's valid.
It seems compelling to me, especially when the entire thing is seen as metaphor and allegory. The Old Testament's rife with, sacrificial rams and the blowing of the shofar, the ram's horn. It just makes too much sense. And like you said, the preponderance of circumstantial evidence sooner or later becomes too much to ignore, right?
And it's human nature to put a lot of significance on an upcoming event. I mean, the millennium that we had, that was talked about, and people started planning for that in the 1950s, the first millennium party. So it would make sense that, people want this to be big, so why wouldn't this literature start coming out? This just makes kind of human nature sense.
Yeah, incidentally, one thing occurs to me. You mentioned that they started preparing for the age of Aquarius back in the 50s. And of course, Augustus he died in the year 14 of the current era, but Virgil was writing at least 30 years before that. And so there was mention of this. But in the Christian literature, we have the curious thing. When you read about the dawn of the coming, the second coming, and basically the new age, the coming of the kingdom and the heavenly kingdom, the kingdom of heaven, which is a very astrological sounding thing to me. Mm-hmm. But it says that no man will know the day. Nobody, not even the sun, knows the day or the hour when that will happen. Well, now that sounds kind of like, hedging your bets, but at the same time, there is a very good reason to suspect that completely honest people at the time predicting such a thing would say that, and here's why. The constellation Pisces, unlike Aries and some of the other constellations, is just spread out all over. In fact, part of the constellation Pisces actually extends into the zone of Aries. Since there are no boundary lines in the sky to tell you where this constellation ends and that constellation begins, or this zodiacal sign ends and that zodiacal sign begins, they could not know when it would begin.
Yeah, just from the shape of the constellation itself.
I'm sorry, the constellation itself is spread out. So, nobody told the stars that they were going to be used for astrology someday.
Like you said, convenient way to hedge your bets.
They are where they are,
Yeah, Beetlejuice never wanted to be part of Orion. It's mad.
Yeah, well, at least I think that's true.
But I get it. That's really interesting.
It's 2:40. You're listening to the Mythicist Milwaukee show. It's normally time for Myth of the Day, and I'm not sure every time we come up with one, you bust it out for us, Frank. It's funny. You've been spoiling them. But Antonio is here. We like to do a little segment where we expose a myth. So it's time now for Myth of the Day. Take it away, Antonio.
Thank you so much again, Mr. Zindler, for accepting this request to be on the show today. I will have two myths of the day. One will be related to Aquarius, where I quote Acharya, and she states, Jesus evidently makes mention of the precession of the equinoxes, of the change of the ages, when he says to the disciples who are asking about how to prepare for the Passover, quote, "Behold, when you have entered the city, a man carrying a pitcher of water will meet you. Follow him into the house which he enters." That is Luke 22:10. This famous yet enigmatic passage ostensibly refers to the house or age of Aquarius, the water bearer, and Jesus is instructing his disciples to pass over into it. And the next myth of the day is the following. It has been claimed that the Southern Cross is not visible from the Northern Hemisphere, and that therefore the Egyptians, for one, could not have included it in their myths. In the first place, the fact that the Southern Cross is indeed visible in the current era from anywhere south of 27 degrees north, which includes a large portion of Egypt, such as some of the most important sites like Abu Simbel, 21 degrees north, Luxor, 25 degrees north, and Aswan, 24 degrees north, as well as some of the most ancient sites like Napta Playa, 22 degrees north, where again there is an ancient observatory at least 6,000 years old. Secondly, at the time when the gospel story purportedly took place, the Southern Cross was visible just south of 32 degrees north, as related by astronomer Dr. Chris Dolan. Quote, the Southern Cross is only visible from sites further south than 27 degrees north latitude. At the time of Christ, however, it was visible from the latitude of Jerusalem, almost 32 degrees north.
Time does go by. Thank you, Antonio. I think those eras or those epochs are about 2150, right? I think 2150 is when the Age of Aquarius actually starts, no?
Yeah, that you're within 20 years, I think.
Well, I plan to be there, so it's important to me.
Give or take.
Can you tell me when?
I'm just going to say 2163. I don't know.
Oh, come on. It's hoping for 2142, 2150 is a stretch for me. But we're talking to Frank Zindler today, who has been there since the beginning of the secular atheist movement. But we want to talk to him a little bit about his theory that Christianity had no real point in time. A lot of what we talk about is, where and when the actual sect of Christianity took hold and started spreading. Talk to us about your thoughts there. I think you think it's sort of an underexposed topic.
About what?
About your theory about when and where Christianity started.
Oh, okay. Well, I think that Christianity did not begin at a point in time or space, either one. Almost everybody, including most mythicists, try to trace the beginning of Christianity back to some event, whether that event was a particular person or whatever, but something very specifically, and then Christianity grew like a tree and branched out into varieties and so forth. I think, though, that Christianity began, as did most of the ancient religions that we know of, the Greco-Roman religion, the Egyptian religion, the Indian religion. That is to say, it coalesced at various times by the intertwining, like a braid, of different threads of religious tradition. And these came into the braid, left the braid, bifurcated within the braid, whatever, so that you have to say, well, Christianity, you have to think of Christianity as a cross-section through the braid at particular points in time. In regard to the origins of Christianity, I think, for example, there is a thread in this braid, and we're now talking the end of the 1st century. There is a thread in this braid that involves the emperor cult. For example, the very word gospel was euangelion in Greek, was first used by Augustus Caesar, and this is in a rock inscription. And he was the Prince of Peace. He was the Son of God, and he was indeed a god, as voted by the Senate. And Herod the Great built several temples to Augustus. So we know the Augustan religion existed in the Levant. Mm-hmm. So I think the emperor cult was one of the threads. I believe that there were threads that derived from the mystery religions, including Mithraism, but not exclusively that. There was a Christ cult that somehow became fused with a Jesus cult, which probably involves some magical movements involving magic. Yao often is, which of course is Yahweh, is often equated with Jesus. In fact, the ancient slogan, Jesus is Lord, literally means Jesus is Yahweh. As you remember, the sacred name Yahweh could not be pronounced on pain of death. because it was the magic secret name of the deity. And so when the Hebrew scriptures were translated into Greek, the Tetragrammaton, which has just consonants, could not be written out in Greek, because if it were written in Greek, you could pronounce it. And so they used the word Lord, or Kyrios, whenever Yahweh should be said. And so when you say Jesus is Lord, you are really saying Jesus is Yahweh. So Jesus is Yao, and all of the magical papyri and so on from ancient times have, among their many magical incantation words, is Yao, and sometimes Jesus is spelled out. So this would be one of the threads. Now, I am still trying to figure out what all of these threads are. I'm trying to figure out when Christ and Jesus came together, and all of these things. So the books of the New Testament are all composites. They are all documents that have multiple authors and editors. And so trying to tease all of these layers out is very, very difficult. And if I didn't have to work full-time and could just spend my time doing biblical research, I might be able to tease these apart. I'm not sure.
But that's great, an analogy, like the thread of the rope, that you can pull one individual strand out, that it really doesn't make sense without all of that. That I think many people are perceiving it as the actual thread and not the twine, not the braid.
Yeah. If I may just add one more thing that comes to mind now. So many scholars, even non-mythicists, are becoming increasingly perplexed by the fact that as more and more is learned about earliest Christianity, we find only heresies like Docetism and so on. And it's very clear, everybody is now admitting that from the earliest period of which we have any record, Christianity was multifarious and multifaceted and very, very different strands. So, for example, the Docetists said basically Jesus didn't have a body. Well, whoa. Were they mythicists? Yes, actually, the Docetists, by definition, I guess, were mythicists. In other words, they said that Jesus never was a human being in reality, that he was a spirit who either took possession of a human body, but it wasn't his body, or he was start to finish a spirit, and spirits are what myths are made of, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that the multifarious aspect of earliest Christianity perfectly shows these different threads of tradition that are being wound together, some of them disappearing rather early in the winding, but others continuing for quite a while, and some of them splitting off. One other thing, I think there was a Baptist cult religion, and threads of that became entangled into Christianity. And there probably was a Mary cult of some sort that probably came from Egypt, I suppose. But I think that once we stop looking for a point in time and space for the beginning of Christianity, we are going to start a completely new paradigm of research. The sky's the limit now as to where we should be looking and to try to piece together how Christianity began. I think, I don't know how much is known about the origins of Hinduism, for example, but I know that there is quite a bit known of how various different deities, their cults and so on, became welded together. And I think that this is perhaps a model then for Christian origins research, to try to tease apart these different threads. And we need to trace the evolutionary changes of each of these threads, because, of course, no thread stays the same from the beginning to the end. There is evolution within each thread. And so to try to separate these is what we need to do.
So you started at the beginning. Take us to the end now and give us your perspective on the state of religion in America. Are you an optimist? Are you a pessimist in the face of the rise of creationism? It's one thing to believe in a God and the Bible as metaphor and a way
Well,
to guide
as
your life.
you perhaps know, for many, many years, I was a debater against all the leading creationists. I debated Duane Gish and John Morris and many of the other big names, more notorious names.
Notorious.
I suspect that probably there is a limit to how large a percentage of the human population can be atheist, as opposed to believers in whatever idea comes around. I think that genetically, in the evolution of the human species, we evolved as a social species, and part of that inheritance is that we inherited follow the leader genes.
Makes sense.
and suggestibility genes. And there probably is some optimal ratio as to how many leaders and how many followers, how many preachers and how many believers for the species to operate, or at least that has been so in the past. I don't think we are locked into that. Sure. Just because that's our evolutionary path doesn't mean it has to stay that way. But I think that is the biological reality at the moment. There are still many people who will never be comfortable thinking for themselves. And I suspect that they will probably always remain either believers overtly or crypto-believers, as was in the case of the Soviet Union, right. All those years when the communists were in control. Religion never really died in the Soviet Union, and I think, though, that what we can hope for, and I am predicting, is that religion will spread to all of our leadership. And so the most competent people, in my opinion, then, will be guiding the government and guiding the society. But if I look at the television debates recently, I must confess I'm not optimistic.
I wish we had time to talk about that. I want to get your plug-in for your YouTube page. Through Atheist Eyes, we just have a couple minutes left. YouTube channel. Frank Zindler, tell us about your efforts on YouTube.
Well, my YouTube channel has a lot of stuff on it. It has a lot of satire. It has a lot of interviews with both famous atheists and common atheists that many people will identify better with. I have a series that I'm working on now. It'll be 10 to 15 parts. 4 parts are mounted on my channel, called Immortality Now, Living as Long as You Wish. And it deals with the causes of aging. I start with the evolutionary background of lifespan determination. And then, because in my daily work I deal with this, I am including increasing amounts of medical research on how to slow down the aging process and ultimately what we are learning on how to reverse certain aspects of it. So these are increasingly elaborate productions. Yeah. I can't do very many of them very quickly. So I'm not quite sure when I'll have the next part 5 done. It'll be on telomeres, but that's a really big thing now in aging research.
You know, indeed. What is the name of that channel again? I haven't seen it yet. I'm eager to check it out. Could you give us the name of the channel?
Okay, my channel on YouTube is called Through Atheist Eyes with Frank Zindler. So if you just go to YouTube and search under Zindler, you'll come up with a lot of retrievals, of course.
Yes.
But almost all of them will have icons that are colored, even many of my own. But the icon for the channel itself is the only black, white, and gray one. It's a picture of me in an African tunic. So, so click on that, and that'll take you to the channel. Then please hit the subscribe button.
Yes, hit the subscribe.
And after you've done that, then pull down the videos menu to see all of the programs that I've got. I don't know if I've got 30 programs now or not, but I've got a lot of programs. And I think we've just now mounted my first music video.
Nice. He's Frank Zindler. We are out of time. Thank you so much for joining us, Frank. Stay on the line after we're finished for a minute. We can chat and make sure you get the link to this program, which will be on YouTube and iTunes. Find us on iTunes at the Mythicist Milwaukee Show, and join us next week for Professor Phil Zuckerman. And another great show. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Take it easy. Bye-bye.
Oh, I was going to say, I had a personal question, if you're willing. My father, who's about your age, is a believer, but he's also a rationalist. And he recently went to the Holy Land and noticed that there aren't any trees there, and that Jesus probably couldn't be a carpenter. And the tour guide suggested that, they just mistranslated that, and he was actually a stonemason.
I've heard that one, too.
What's your take on this kind of stuff? I imagine that's just a convenient switch.
The word in Greek is tekton. And that can mean a carpenter. It can mean a mason. It's really a builder,
like a furniture maker.
I think it can even mean an architect. But the tekton was actually a technical term in Gnosticism, and the demiurge, one of his epithets was tekton. He was the artificer of the universe, and that, of course, was Yahweh. So my guess is that tekton there is a code word, and of course he never was anything, but
right.
I think that accounts for that. Of course, the fact that the Holy Land, so-called, is treeless at this point doesn't really tell anything about what it was
that's
in the turn of the era. But
I don't think that there was a whole lot more trees that long ago there either. But my other observation is that we're talking about poetic imagery in my view with all of the story, and is it not purposely poetically ironic, if you will, that the carpenter was carpentered to death? He was basically killed using the tools of his own, really using the wood and the hammer and the nail and the tools of his own trade. I think there's something to that. Or just the fact that he was nailed to wood at all. He was supposedly a carpenter's killed.
Yeah, incidentally, do you know that in the canonical Gospels, it never actually says in the description of the crucifixion, none of the four Gospels says that nails were used.
Wow.
And it's only implied by some anti-Gnostic or anti-Docetic interpolations where Jesus is made to show his wounds. And, of course, the implication is that these are wounds made by the nails. But one of the chapters or one of the sub-chapters in my Bart book is called For Want of a Nail. And it shows that the idea of crucifixion evolved within the Christ cult.
Right.
And originally, the crucifixion, in my opinion, was something that occurred at the intersection of the celestial equator and the ecliptic, in other words, the vernal equinox. And that is the time, Easter, that is when, of course, the crucifixion of Jesus occurred. But now, if Jesus is the sun god, where is the sun on the vernal equinox? He's right at the intersection of the two celestial circles. And incidentally, the first cross, the oldest cross, is the Chi cross.
Cairo.
Mm-hmm. And as you know, the intersection of the ecliptic and the equator is 23.5 degrees. And if you just turn that sideways, it looks like the Greek letter Chi. And so the Chi cross was the oldest cross. And incidentally, the Chi Rho monogram, which stands for Christos now, but originally in a papyrus from Herculaneum of Aristotle's commentary on the Constitution of Athens, the Chi-Rho cross is used as an abbreviation for Chronos,
Time.
the god of time.
Yeah, see, that's the thing. It's almost like, the teenager is lying when there's just too many coincidences to say something else is going on. Yeah, he really was at that party till 3 a.m.
And so, when we, again, tying in with the beginning of the New Age, well, I suppose Chronos is as good as symbolism as any for the new chronocrat, right?
Yeah, agreed. This is awesome. Oh, wait, I really appreciate the bonus that I just got there. Thanks.